Call this regularly stated meeting to order. First order of business is roll call. Candy, please collect the roll.
We'll start with Mr. Boyle. Okay, and when I say your name, tell that you're here and your location. Mrs. Sealing?
Here, Hilltop.
Mr. Hoffman? Mr. Winbolt?
Present, Hilltop.
Mr. Updike?
Present, Hilltop.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Here at Hilltop.
Mr. Anderson?
Hilltop.
All right.
Next item is approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded for the approval of the agenda. Any questions or discussion, additions? Candy, please collect the vote.
Start the vote with Mrs. Sealing.
Yes.
Mr. Hoffman? Not here. Mr. Winbolt?
Yes.
Mr. Updike?
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell?
Yes.
Mr. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Boyle?
Yes.
Approved.
Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
For which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Well, thank you and welcome, everyone. We're glad to see you here. Moving on to recognitions, Dr. Burke.
Yeah, we'll start with Spring Hill Middle School, Trevor Gertson.
I'm excited because I believe in my 2 years as principal, this is my first time to be the first up. And so looking forward to recognizing some special people. Tonight, I want to recognize the building leadership team at Spring Hill Middle School. I have 14 teachers. We meet twice a month, and we've consistently met twice a month as a team for 2 years now. And I really look at this group of people as a vital part of the success we have at Spring Hill Middle School, because not only do we do nuts and bolts, but it's also a team that provides ideas, feedback, support for one another every 2 weeks. And they're also leaders within the building and within the Spring Hill Middle School. And so I want to recognize the 14 staff members. They give of their time every 2 weeks to serve in the building leadership team. We have Brianna Dalton, Caitlin Olson, Helen Cutis, Jill Starling, Joanne Keckley, Lindsay Davey, Melissa Torres, Megan Story, Mika Bauer, Rebecca Cheek, Becky Beach, and Taylor Woodward. And again, each of these staff show up every 2 weeks, provide feedback, input. Not only do they kind of support me, but support one another and support the building. So very, very grateful for the leadership team at Spring Hill Middle School.
Spring Hill High School, Mark Williams.
Thank you. Good evening. First, I'd like to say a big thank you to Clay Fregon, Wes Book, Tucker Woofter, their assistant coaches, and all of our student athletes for completing a successful winter sports season. You know, it was not recommended to have winter sports this year, but these guys and young ladies did a great job throughout the season, followed mitigation expectations. Everything looked weird, but they were successful on and off the court, and I can't thank them enough for that. One young lady I'd like to recognize is Juliana Yoder. She finished 6th in state in girls wrestling, which is a huge accomplishment for her as a freshman. Keisha's doing things a little bit different. They're trying to keep the numbers down that officially go to the state competition, and she was able to battle through all these quarterfinals, semifinals, and everything else to get there down to Wichita and compete. Last but not least, I'm very fortunate to work with some great staff members and surround myself with great students. So there's a little over 900 of us in that building on a daily basis. And these people are working really hard to make this successful. And I'm just applauding them for keeping the building safe, doing what they're expected to be doing, following our expectations, and continuing to learn and teach. And I couldn't be more proud to be associated with them on a daily basis. And big kudos for those for making this successful towards the end. Thank you.
Wolf Creek Elementary School, Beth Cooper.
Good evening. We've had a lot of students return to in-person learning in our district recently, but tonight I'd like to recognize our teachers at Wolf Creek that continue to provide remote services to our ORL students. I had the pleasure today of getting to sit in and watch a lesson between a special education teacher and a student receiving IEP services. And it was just so neat to see the accommodations she had made, the tools she had mastered so that she could deliver really effective instruction. The connection between the student and the teacher was just really a lovely thing to watch. And so all of our special educators, paraprofessionals included, have made some great adaptations to continue delivering those services. And at Wolf Creek, we also house the ORL kindergarten classroom. And Mrs. Dwyer continues to do an amazing job adapting all of her lessons to be effective with kindergartners. We like to call it breaking down that Zoom wall to deliver effective instruction and to get them interacting with each other. It is also just an amazing thing to watch. So I just wanted to kind of honor them tonight and give them a little shout out.
Timber Sage Elementary School, Darcy Sly.
Well, good evening. Tonight I want to recognize our special education teachers and the paras that work with them every day. Tiffany Thompson, Kendra Walsh, and Susan Wells, which was Susan Wegman, but she got married over our little conference break. They just work so hard every single day. It's just fun to watch them with the kids, and they're just in there working their magic. And they don't only work with the kids that are needing extra services, but they're in there helping every student. I can see these pairs walking down the hallway, and if there's a child that's in a different grade level even that they don't even know, if they see that they need some help, they just jump in and help them. They're so willing to do anything that we ask of them, and I really appreciate them. The other person that I want to recognize is Gary Sutterby. He's new to Timber Sage. He's come over as the custodian there, the full-time custodian, and he's just done a fabulous job. He's jumping right in, learning all of the things that we are doing at Timber Sage, and is willing to give us his advice and is willing to help us in any way that he can. And we really appreciate him as well. Thank you.
Prairie Creek Elementary School, Jody Cole. I'm going to go ahead and jump over to Spring Hill Elementary School, Tammy Endicott.
Sorry. I wanted to recognize two teachers tonight that I got to thinking about, and I don't think I've ever recognized these two ladies, and they're two very hardworking ladies, Stephanie Brewster and Tanya Branham, which are our title teachers at Spring Hill Elementary School. They teach 18 to 20 plus small group lessons a day, and they have to lesson plan for each one of those lessons, as well as prepare for the pairs that they have working for them. They attend every SIT meeting. They are on multiple committees that we have in the building, and sometimes lead them. They provide professional development for our staff. So they do so much, and I can't believe I've never recognized them before, because they're two of our very critical employees at Spring Hill Elementary School. But I wanted to just shout out to them and say thank you for all their hard work.
Woodland Spring Middle School, Rod Sprague.
Good evening. Few people I want to recognize tonight. First off, we just completed our first Stallion play. Last year we had to cancel it in the spring. So we just completed it. Our students did a phenomenal job. And I really want to thank Paul Carter and Lindsay Davey for the work they did with our kids. Just pouring in the time for them, giving them the experience and the opportunity. Our kids did a fantastic job. They performed the plays. We did 2 plays. They performed them 5 times, once for each of the grade levels, and then they did 2 performances for parents. So they had a great experience. It was a lot of fun. And it was just really great getting to see our kids just shine on the stage, because they truly did. I also want to give a big shout out and thanks to our boys basketball coaches, Morgan Abel, Ben Gearing, Coach Husa, and Whitney Smith, for the work they did with our basketball teams this year. Our boys did a phenomenal job on the court. We're really proud of the growth that they made. And then finally, there's 2 more that I'd like to make, and that is first off to Amy Berman. If you can see the bracket behind me, it is March Madness around here, but it's not a basketball March Madness. It's books. And what we do every year is we take the top 24 books that are checked out of our library that previous year, and we have a competition, and the students actually vote. So right now, students between now and the end of the week, students are voting for their favorite books, and they're competing against each other, and then we'll get to the championship round on Friday. So we're very excited about that. A lot of things happening with that. And then last but not least, I want to talk about MTSS and the work that our staff has done. This year's been a lot of kind of exploration, trial, work with that, but we've got a team of people that have started working on building what will an MTSS system look like at Woodland Spring Middle School next year. And that's being led by Zach Harwood and Jolene Rutledge, but also teachers like Stacy Floyd, Megan Sandberg, Ben Clary, and Fauna Fancher have been working on that team. And there's many others too that have, contributed and helped out with that. So I'm really proud of the work that they're doing. As we kind of get ready for March 22nd, when we return from spring break, that's when we're going to be putting a lot of our work and emphasis on starting to do the planning part of this, and what do those interventions look like, and what the assessments, and really getting into those assessments, and how are we going to know where students need to be, and what kind of intervention do we need to provide for them, as well as the enrichment that we need to provide for them. So I'm really proud of them. They're doing a fantastic job. We're looking forward to a great spring in the last quarter of the school year.
At this point, we have other. Any administrators want to? Okay, Jody Cole from Prairie Creek.
Thank you, Dr. Berg. My apologies. I found the unmute button. So take two, here we go. I would like to recognize our STEM teacher, Mrs. Yankard. Ariel works at both Prairie Creek and Timber Sage. This year, Ariel has written our STEM mission statement and created a design thinking roadmap. She has planned scaffolding of coding and robotics for grades K through 5, and she has developed a career awareness into her STEM lessons. Some STEM projects Ariel has provided our students are BattleBots, a golf course design, robotics, structural engineering, and my personal favorite, the Macy's Day Parade robots. Ariel has also provided professional development this year, such as Nearpod, Seesaw, Flipgrid, and video creation. Mrs. Yankard is a phenomenal STEM teacher, and we are fortunate she works for Spring Hill. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. Any other administrators?
Thank you, Dr. Burke. I just wanted to take a quick second and recognize a couple of my staff members. We had a unique situation pop up here in the last week or so with a social media issue with some students that occurred off of our network with very little visibility from our standpoint. Nick Stiles and Colton Easton took some, I'm not even sure I'd call them breadcrumbs. They were more like grains of salt, and did quite a bit of research and was able to identify the source and help get that issue shut down. So I just want to recognize it because it was not something that was obvious, and they were really thinking out of the box to solve it. So I just wanted to thank them for their efforts.
As the parent of a high schooler, I wanted to tell you thank you. So I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to thank you publicly tonight anyway, and your team. It's very much appreciated.
The only other one that, if no one else is going to come forward, I do want to recognize Mrs. Hackney, Michelle Hackney. We have every employee that wants to be vaccinated has been able to get vaccinated. And the fact that this is a tremendous amount of work, coordination, and being able to get people there, trying to work with their schedules and get them. So I believe everybody that wants to be vaccinated has been through round one. This also includes our substitute teachers, Apple Bus, and Insight. So incredible amount of work. I think we're the first, now we may be smaller, but we also accordingly got percentage the same amount of vaccine as anybody else. So we are the first district in Johnson County that has had everybody vaccinated. And the amount of stress and work that went into it, I want to make sure that we take a moment and recognize her for our work. So thank you. If nobody else, that's it, Mr. Updike.
Very good, thank you. A lot of great recognitions. Moving on to business with individuals.
No cards were submitted?
All right, thank you. Moving on to our consent agenda, which consists of approval of the consent agenda items, approval of the minutes, and personnel. Any questions, comments, additions, or subtractions on the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
It's moved and second for approval of the consent agenda as it read. Any final questions or comments? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes?
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealy,
Yes.
Very
approved.
good, thank you. Moving on to action items. The first action item is the math textbook adoption process. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, I'm going to turn this over to Brad Wilson. I believe we did a presentation at the last board meeting. So go ahead, Brad.
Yep. I'd love to address any questions or comments you might have, and then after that, I would recommend adoption of this resource.
I would just say thank you for your time put into it. I thought that presentation was really good. It definitely put my mind at ease, and then also the books as we flipped through last week. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you.
I think I said this last meeting too, but I just really appreciated the curriculum. Looked like it was a lot more straightforward and less mental gymnastics to get to the proper math. So I think they picked out a very good series.
Teachers worked very hard on this, and we're very proud of them.
Mr. President, I move the board adopt the new, or the district adopt the new math textbook program called Ready Math.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the math textbook as presented. Any final questions or comments?
Just want to say I appreciate the teachers, instructional coaches, Brad, anybody else that was involved. And I know how, as the presentation showed, this was a large amount of work. And I'm sure we have some coming up again next year, and we'll have PLCs to go through that as well. And I appreciate the new process. It really helps us make that decision. So thank you.
And one of our community members, Vernita Edwards, helped lead that process. That was nice.
Candy, please collect the vote.
Start the vote with Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealy,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
approved.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Thank you. A lot of work into that. Thank you for everyone's participation in that. That's a rigorous process, but a very important process. Moving on to Spring Hill Elementary School paving bids. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, apologize. This project has been brought up at the January 11th and February 8th board meetings. And I apologize, earlier in the week, we didn't put all the bids on here, so there were multiple bids. And I'll turn this over to Kylie Delphi.
So we had 4 bids come in on the repaving project, and Advanced Asphalt won the bid at $138,600. And I asked for approval of that. I stand for any questions.
Could you maybe just give a quick overview of the scope, just high level?
Quick overview of what?
The scope of the bid, just kind of high level.
Sure. So they're going to do a 2-inch mill on the majority of the parking lot. The areas that are hashed out there on the bus loop, and there's some areas in the parking, they're going to do full depth repairs. And that's pretty much the scope. Now, they're also doing the playground area as well, 2-inch mill on that with overlay. And there's some areas in the old DSC parking lot that they're going to there's areas where cars are turning in and getting
you know, they're going through the mud, tracking mud through the parking lot. We're just doing some short areas there to pave over, so.
Thank you.
This is start and completion, dates on that?
Yes, June 1st, they got till June 1st till July, the end of July, July 31st.
Mr. President, I move that the board approve advanced asphalt's bid in the amount of $138,600 to repave the parking lot and playground area at Spring Hill Elementary School.
Second.
It's moved and seconded to approve the advanced asphalt bid as noted. Any final questions or discussion?
Just like to say thank you, because I think this is something that people are going to be very pleased with.
Yeah, it was time, definitely time.
And they'll go back and drive on the street again and be disappointed.
Very good. Thank you. Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start with Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
approved.
Very good. Thank you. Moving on to the board retreat report.
Yeah, if you guys remember that we met and had a great retreat and really got a lot of work done back in March. One of the things that we did is we worked with KSB to kind of revamp your board handbook. A couple of things that we did, I did want to highlight, point in there. The vision statement was cleaned up so that we have the current district vision in there. And then we did go ahead and put in the strategic plan for, it's actually the 2026, am I saying that right?
Mm-hmm.
Because even though the plan was approved this year, it's a 5-year plan. And so the 2020 plan, which was the end of it, we were kind of finishing up. We were able to move on and get ready to start working on the new 2026 plan. And so excited. Plus, I want to thank Katie Claire. She got to go in and change all the numbering at the last minute today, so I apologize to her, but I also want to thank her for doing that, because when we make last minute changes like that, it changes everything. The other thing is the values study plan. We talked about having Brian Jordan from KSB to come in and work with you on a values study plan. I think the board works very well with Brian, and it's good to have an outside source that can kind of come in and lead us through that process. So these are, while I will stand for any questions, these are actually your documents. So anything that I can't answer, hopefully you guys we can all work together and answer this. But highly recommend that we go ahead and approve the new board, or not the new, but the updated board handbook and the value study plan.
I just have one question on the value study plan. We had talked about adjusting the dates. And it looks like they're still the same, so I don't know whether that necessarily matters to approve it, but are we looking at?
We can make adjustments on the dates because I did talk to Brian and said that we're going to move things back, so I apologize. We probably need to make some adjustments, but you can approve this and just say with adjustments to the dates.
Any other questions or discussion?
Mr. President, I move we approve the 2021 board handbook and the value study plan as presented with the dates changed on the interviews.
Second.
It's moved and second to approve the revised handbook and the value study plan as noted. Any final discussion or questions?
And I guess do we have to formally say the board focus areas as well?
Pardon me?
We need to mention the board focus areas as well, I guess, in the
Within,
motion.
Yeah, they've been integrated within I know the first two have been integrated within the handbook.
I see.
Yeah, approval of the 4 focus areas as well. Any final discussion or comment? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell.
Yes.
Approved.
Very good, thank you. Moving on to discussion items, bond construction update, Dr. Burke.
Tim Meek is coming forward. We'll turn it over to Tim, our Director of Construction and Safety.
I'll let Phil get it rotated here. There we go. Okay, real quickly, the bond, the budget, no real changes to that from what we presented last time. So we'll go on down to Dayton Creek, our Educational Support Center, real quick. We're just still working on final reconciliation and close out in the project. Close out. Dayton Creek Elementary School, scheduled for completion. Actually here, we're hoping in April to get the TCO on it. So with furniture arriving in May. So they're right now finishing, casework's actually been completed this week. I think there's one cabinet that got damaged during shipment that they're waiting for, but flooring is going, the hallways and the gym. You'll see on one of the next slides a picture of the gym floor going in and the hallways starting. So waiting on some concrete site work, and irrigation is going right now. Working on punch list items as well. Hopefully March 31st, I think or March 30th is the date March 30th is the date we hope to have the State Fire Marshal do his walkthrough on it that's one of the major steps before the TCO. Challenge successes there, Daco painting, and then commercial floor works are the two that come in at the end and make everything look pretty when almost everybody else is gone, and they've done a great job of finishing out. One of the first times I've ever had a painter follow us around on the punch list, and 95% of the stuff he was able to touch up right as we were punching it, and so it's nice to know that it's done versus putting a piece of blue tape on the wall and hoping that somebody didn't just peel it off and you don't remember exactly which little dot we were looking at. So it was good to have him follow it. They did a great job. Another success is we finally have the domestic and the fire water lines are installed. Furniture, like I said, ordered and will be there May 1 starting. One of the challenges has been our glass and glazing company. They have a lot of little pieces that they've had trouble getting in. Part of it is related to shipment, but I think they are right now really close to. There's like one little piece that they're still missing, and they'll be done. And one piece of glass that they broke that they have to get back. But safety report, accidents 0, lost time accident 0 for 302 days. And so you can see a couple pictures there, one of the commons area, and the gym floor installation. Actually, all the gym floor is down now. This was back on 3/2. So Spring Hill Middle School number 3, scheduled for fall of 2023. And as of the time we did this, there was no construction work going on there, but now, as of Wednesday, they came in and started doing a little bit of dirt work, putting in temporary roads, lay down areas, and taking a lot of the trees and stuff like that, and a couple of barns that were on the structure, on the property down as well. So for the rest of it, we're still working on the pre-construction phase, and the dates were there for when we'll finish the bids up. We plan to open the bids on the 14th of April and have the bids for approval here at the meeting on the 26th as of right now. So we're still waiting a little bit of pending of the review from Spring Hill, City of Spring Hill, before we make that final, but that's the plans as of right now. So you can see on that Wednesday, you can see where they were starting to take down some trees and stuff like that. So Other construction projects, Spring Hill District Admin Center. We will be moving the district admin people, the board office staff right now in there beginning Monday. So that's exciting to get them in. The other milestones will be to complete the AV in the boardroom. We're still waiting on some parts and pieces to come in on that. So yeah, still on the boat sitting off the coast of California or somewhere waiting to get unloaded. So so we're waiting on those pieces to get in. They have started the engineering on the AV equipment, and so as soon as the equipment gets here, they'll be ready to do the install. So that's really what we're waiting for on that, and kind of out of our hands right now till that comes in. So project closeout is 90% done right now. So we're just waiting on the financials of trying to close everything out. Challenge successes, training for the HVAC system went really well. The Door King, got it all done. Furniture install, the furniture looks really good. There was one little piece that was damaged, and that will be taken care of Wednesday, I believe. The part got shipped in, and so that tabletop had a scratch on it, so they get to replace that tabletop or desktop. So actually, the construction portion of that is pretty well done, except for a little bit of outside landscaping that has to be finished when the grass can start growing. I noticed this morning when I was walking around that the grass seed that we have planted has really started to pop. Hopefully it continues to grow and not get burned out from the cold or whatever, but it should be all right. So again, 235 days with no accidents. So Spring Hill Elementary School paving, I won't go over that again. We will continue to update you on that. One other project that is coming up that Kylie is working on a lot is tennis court rehab. So we're working on trying to get some of the cracks filled, and it's more than just filling cracks. It's actually a process of spanning across the cracks and stuff like that. And as we get the pricing and the bids in on that, we'll be bringing them back to you. Right now, we're just basically working with a couple of different manufacturers and installers to make sure we do the right fix on them. So
is that at the high school?
At Spring Hill High School, yeah. So, any questions?
Yeah, I have a question on the administrative center. We usually don't see numbers because it's not connected to a bond. How close were we to budget on this? And I know we had a budget and that sort of thing, but I haven't seen financials on it yet.
Yeah, and as far as the construction portion of it goes, we are about 200,000, I believe. That's last I saw. I think it's real close to 200,000 under on it. So, we should come in real good on that. Furniture was less than what we had budgeted, but there's some other FF&E, such as the AV equipment and some other things going in there, and we'll give you a final accounting when we get that. But everything's under budget right now. We're doing well on it. So.
On the middle school number 3, what's the timeline for, and this may be more of a question for Dr. Burke, for naming and all of that sort of thing? Or do you even know for sure yet?
We're probably at least a year away from that, maybe a year and a half.
About a year from now, we'll start on it, because we'll have some things like the mascot and things like that we like at Woodland Springs. When you look at that in the Commons, you'll see the logo and stuff like that, and we'll want to get that. So
we'll try to, if you remember when we did Woodland Spring, we pretty much had been able to identify which kids were going to go there. So we were able to get input from those kids as to mascots, and then would also get inputs for name of the schools and things like that. So that's why we're probably a year away from that.
Yeah, it's at least a year away.
So. The Spring Hill District Administrative Center, first of all, it's amazing in there. I mean, kudos to Tim and Phil and Kylie and all the guys that worked on it. We've been doing what we call a slow move, or as I used to call it, a closet move. So moving some of our personal items over there. Our hope is that I believe it's April 12th is the next board meeting. Our hope is that that board meeting is at that location. So we're very, very excited about that. We are going to close the board office. Oh, we don't think so?
I don't think it's gonna, I don't think we'll
We
have.
may not have the technology.
The technology won't be there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's not on us. That means we ordered it and it's just not here yet.
yeah.
So sorry to get people excited, but if some miracle comes in and it makes it in, we'll have a shot. But otherwise.
I mean, as soon as it gets here, like I said, they're working on the engineering, so when the parts and pieces all get here, it'll be a fairly, I can't say quick, but it'll be a much quicker process than if they were waiting to do the engineering when it gets there.
We'll have to wait and see when the technology comes. So
It's all dependent on when that technology shows up. The room is ready. I mean, as far as the building part of it, but the technology, we're still,
what we're going to need to do is close the board office and the district administrative center next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Monday will be move day. Tuesday we'll finish the move and start unpacking, and Wednesday just the day to make sure that everything's where it should be. So, but we will be able to take phone calls, but we won't be have walk-ins. But hopefully most people are gone on spring break anyway, and so that's a good time for us to be able to do this move. So very, very excited, but it is just amazing in there. I mean, the changes that happened just from the last time we was in there until now, just when carpeted and paint and desk and furniture, it's just amazing how nice that building is. So kudos to the board to make that decision a few years ago. That I know that there was some grinding of teeth, but now when it's actually sitting there and we're actually going to be able to start using it, it was a very good decision. So thank you.
Tim, just one quick question. Do you have any idea, have you ever aggregated all of the accident-free days for all of the projects?
we can find that out. I haven't. I mean, it's.
And how many person days that is? Because just because you have an accident-free day, reality is there's anywhere from.
I mean, there's anywhere from
100
5 to 100 people there. So,
right, and
yeah.
so, I mean, I'd be interested to know those numbers.
I can, if you'd like, I could have J.E. Dunn try to pull that, especially for the 2016, now that it's all closed out. That would be a real interesting one to pull out for you, if you'd like.
2016 bond issue.
The 2016 bond issue.
Number.
Yeah.
Because that's a fairly impressive number.
Yeah.
Based on, you have 300 plus days accident-free. And then each one of those days is.
I mean, even if you figured 20 people there or whatever, so, I mean, which is a very low number, really, for a lot of days, so.
So I'd be interested to know that. I think it's a.
Yeah, I mean, they've got the.
Milestone, just for the focus, the district and you certainly, and Kylie and Phil. I mean, I know there's always a real diligent focus on safety, and I think that's really appreciated. It's a good thing. So.
It quite honestly, though, it stems from the board and the way you guys look at it as well, if you want my opinion. You guys have pretty high expectations for us, and we want to, live up to those. And so it comes from us to J.E. Dunn. J.E. Dunn already has pretty high expectations for safety as well. So it's a very good, combination of the, and I think you'll, just as well as it's not just in the construction side, but it's also in the daily things that happen in our school and in our workforce here as well. So
good. I'd just like to know those numbers if we could.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We've got the information of how many men were on site every day. So during that, and so I'll be glad to bring that back for again, I can do it for up till now if you want to, but I think just the 2016 would be a really good.
Package it up on the 2016 because that's mostly complete.
Yeah, that is closed out and we can get those exact numbers. So okay.
Good. Very good. Thank you, Tim. Any other questions for bond update? Moving on, next discussion item is the spring 2021 technology purchases. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, we'll turn it over to Phil Elliott, our Director of Technology.
So typical year time frame is I spend most of spring break hashing out all the details on all the quantities and parts and pieces and things that we need. Bring that back to you the first meeting in April, and then the second meeting we approve it. Just like our AV equipment, there's starting to be a greater lag on delivery, and so I'm starting to get a little bit nervous. Here's the general plan, and I just want to get some input from you guys to make sure you're okay with it. Any of these items that has a good delivery timeline, we'll go ahead and do the 2 meetings with actual dollar figures, okay? So if there's something that doesn't need that extra 2 weeks or the extra month time frame that we would potentially need to get it here, to put it in place before school starts next August, we will go ahead and give you 2 times to look at it with actual dollars. But this is the general list of things that are on my review list. Some of these items will be less than 20,000. Some of these items might not even happen. I'll give you an example of one on there. The HP printers, the laser printers that we have throughout the building. We may, just because of some previous inventory and some changes in use, we may not have to purchase any. So that might be one that doesn't even come back, okay? But so this is just kind of a master list of things that we've identified based on our standard rotation. I tried to identify if they're because of scheduled replacement or if growth. And so pretty much if it's growth, it's because there's things I got to purchase for Dayton Creek. So that's just stuff that was going to happen anyway. And then, you know, some just student device, student number growth, staff growth, those kinds of things. So I'd be happy to stand for any questions, but I just wanted to kind of give you a little heads up that this stuff is going to be coming, and we might bring it back to the meeting in April and ask for approval on some of these items. Otherwise, it'll hit 2 meetings if we can wait.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We did, Mr. Elliott works quite closely with Mrs. Jados, and I believe that Mrs. Jados is been working with Mr. Elliott to purchase some devices for our paras. And so that is something that will be purchased through the special education department. It's going to be devices that are similar to what the students have. When we say similar, it's kind of like your phone right now. If I have an i11 and then the i12 comes out, they're very similar, but they're not exactly the same. So we're going to work on trying to get them some similar devices.
So they will be MacBooks then, but just a different version? Am I understanding that right? That's
Yes.
fantastic news.
Yeah,
So
I think that's something that we've heard on
over and
occasion,
over
that
again.
people would really appreciate that, being able to help the student better if they had the similar device. It's good.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate that. And thank you to everyone, Phil and Status and all of you. All Cindy, so good job, Cindy.
We're really using our MacBooks as somewhat costly Chromebooks, quite frankly. And so we're going to have to take a hard look at this when we get ready to replace student devices next time, because the utilization as a MacBook just really isn't there, based on just the minutes and use of programs. We did a pretty extensive analysis this fall, so it was really a decision that Ms. Jados and Dr. Burke wanted to move forward, because there are very few things that are actually necessary to have the MacBooks in the kids' hands right now. You have some of your higher level courses at the high school and things like that have that, but so like I say, we'll take a hard look at that. We still have a couple years to make that decision. So once we get new curriculum in, that'll be one of Dr. Smith's opportunities to evaluate with me.
Phil, is that kind of driven by more of the cloud-based things that we're doing, or?
It really is. If you think about even in your business world, with the exception of maybe your proprietary applications for what you do, everything else you do in a browser anyway anymore. And if not, it's going there.
And the storage of documents and everything is cloud-based.
Yeah, a lot of your software development companies aren't even making things for local install anymore, because a support issue, they don't have to worry about all the unique settings that you might have on your device or nuances within your network. They can host it in the cloud, and then they've got complete management control of it, and it reduces a lot of their tech support time. So So we're just seeing a trend to move away from local software.
And I will say Chromebook has upped their game. So
So-
where they were quite a few years to go from where they are now.
And there's some resources out there. There's a lot of, even for video now, you know, there's some pretty effective web-based video editing solutions and things like that that will run on those devices. So we just have to, it'd be a tough evaluation because there are some things that would be a challenge for. But those are starting to be a lot smaller percentage than the majority of use.
Does Mac have any kind of a thing like a Chromebook?
They are the Mac platform itself, and I can't give you a timeline because they don't even tell their own people when they're going to make changes. But they are making a transition from the full OS to more of the iPad OS, even with the Mac. This new processor that just came out for the Mac is kind of their first step in that direction. So I think you'll see less and less of a traditional OS operating system on a machine and more of an app-based and therefore cloud-based anyway.
Well, that is good news. I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you.
Good. Moving on to any final comments or discussion? All right. Moving on to copier replacement, Dr. Burke.
We'll turn it back over to Phil again.
As the narrative said, we have 21 copiers currently in our fleet. We'll be adding 2 for Dayton Creek this next year. About 5 years ago, we made the decision to purchase copiers instead of lease them. At that time, there was between 4 and 4.5 years was kind of our break point for being money ahead on purchase versus leasing. And that assumed getting zero value out of them as well. We still think there'll be some resale value in these when the time comes. It won't be a lot, but that we will get some. We've identified the devices that are listed here as devices that need to be replaced. Because of the move of special ed and the board office into the district admin center, it does free up a copier there. So you'll note that one of them actually says replace with BOE 754E. It's a relatively low volume device that has been at the board office. And so we're going to make that move and replace it at the high school rather than, and that's one of the nice things about owning them versus leasing them. We can make that decision on something that doesn't have any repair issues, is still serviceable, and has a decent copy count. So this we'll ask for approval at the next meeting, but this is basically the same series that we've been using. And one nice thing, this is kind of the second round of machines that Doug and I have been able to help the district use, in which we don't get nasty grams and phone calls on a weekly basis about repair issues. Both the support company's been phenomenal, but the equipment's way better than it used to be. So I think, Doug, do you have anything to add about the copiers at all? Microphone, Doug.
Sorry. It's been a fantastic run. We switched companies 5 years ago because Phil and I were pulling our hair out and we were getting beat up left and right, and it was it was ugly. And Ryan Garms, right? Harms. Yeah, I always mess that up. Sold us on these Savins, and they have just
Konicas.
Konica, Minolta's, my bad. KMs. We used to have Savins,
right? And
these things have just operated fantastic. It's been a great decision. They've held up well. It's the best 5-year stretch I've ever had with copiers.
So obviously there's the rest of the fleet is still in use, and we'll be doing this then every few years to try to keep everything operational. They do a really good job giving us Datamax or Sumner One, I guess what they're called now, They do a really good job of keeping Doug and I up to date on repair issues and quantities and things like that. So if we have one that's starting to become a problem, we'll identify it and be able to replace it. Stand for any questions.
So, we're going to, I know that high school's gone to consumables for their English program, and we're doing consumables for the math program. How much do you think we can extend the life because we're doing consumables? We don't have to make copies of all the worksheets that the kids are going to be doing and so on and so forth. Do you think that this could go further than 5 years on this purchase?
I'm glad I've got a mask on right now because you can't see the smirk on my face. I think there's an opportunity because of that and other things for us to evaluate our copier use, yes.
And the other thing is Google Classroom and storing in the cloud and all that type of stuff. Because I'm a big believer in paperless companies, paperless districts, if we can do it. Just because it's easier for people to work with.
There is something to keep in mind, Jason, and this is one of the things that some of these copier counts actually reflect. Because of the price we get per click and the paper cost, it's sometimes cheaper for us to make our own consumables rather than purchase them. It's not always true, but that was actually part of what made some of these have a high copy count with some of the
because I was wondering, there's a few that
there's some that we did in-house that you know, some of the large English and math, especially at the elementary level, that was some of the count was a direct result of some of the curriculum that we were doing because it was cheaper to do it that way than it was to buy the workbooks.
And the packets that we had to print last spring had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, that had an impact as well, you bet.
Any other questions, discussion? Okay, moving on to enterprise lease proposal, Dr. Burke.
Yeah, Doug Swin, and we've been working on this for a while, has a great, exciting opportunity for us, and we'll turn it over to Doug.
All right, good evening. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Go ahead and go to my first slide, or second slide, please, Phil. I went back and looked. It was actually 2012. That's not a typo. When Enterprise first reached out to me for a lease proposal. Back then, it wasn't Ken Olson. Ken Olson is in the building tonight here in case there's a really difficult question I can't answer for you. It was three other guys that came into my office, and they were really wanting us to lease vehicles, and I listened to their proposal, and we shared a bunch of information. And ironically, they came back and said, you know what, the numbers just don't work. You're not big enough for us, but we'll try back, you know, down the road. So I was impressed by the fact they didn't force, you know, really strong arm me into doing business with them. They said, once you get bigger, you know, there might be an opportunity down the road. Well, I think it was about a year ago that Ken reached out to me and said, hey, I think I can save you some money on vehicles, and would you allow me to share some numbers with you? I said, sure, why not? And so we've had a lot of conversations last year, email, Zoom meetings, but we're finally to the point where I think we've got a good, solid proposal to share with you, and then let you decide whether or not it's the right thing to do. Does a lease make sense? I'll be honest, I'm not a fan of leases. It took a lot of convincing to me to make it make sense. We just got done talking about copiers, and we used to lease copiers all the time. And when we crunched the numbers, we said, you know what, all these things got to do is last 4 years, and we're going to be money ahead. And they did exactly that. So not a big fan of leases, but in this case, this is definitely a lease that made sense to me, and I'll show you some numbers here shortly. What are other districts doing? I found 3 of my colleagues, all of them which I've known for at least 10 years, in Goddard, Hayesville, and then next door in Olathe, that have relationships with Ken and Enterprise. And they've been doing it for several years, and they said it was one of the best things they've ever done. They've got a proven track record where the numbers from their initial proposal were pretty close to spot on 3-5 years down the road. So we're not the guinea pig here. It's a program that's being used in other districts, and it's very popular in municipalities and even county agencies, and several in our area. Can we save money? I believe we can, and I'll show you the details here shortly. And then finally, where does this fit into the strategic plan? One of the board goals under health and safety reads, establish programs and processes that improve the safety, security, and health of students and staff. And you'll see that through this lease proposal, we're basically going to take a fleet that has an average age of about 10 years, and within a year or two, it'll be down to 2 years. So when you figure an 8-year reduction in your fleet age, you're putting your staff and students in basically brand new vehicles and keeping them in brand new vehicles, which should be extremely safe and reliable. Okay, next slide. Here's the details, and there's a lot here, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. Probably the biggest number to look at is kind of right in the middle on the right-hand side. You'll see a projected 10-year savings of $835,000. That's a huge number. Personally, I don't know that we can get there. Ken promises me we should get real close, and I think we will. It's amazing to think, and you're wondering how in the world can you lease vehicles and save that much money? And I'll go over that here in just a second, but you'll see how many vehicles that we're looking at trading in over the first couple years, and it's that cashing in the equity, and I'll show you the secret here in just a second. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So here's the major points to consider. Like I said, I went to 3 of my colleagues that were that had a track record, and all of them spoke extremely highly of the program, and it did exactly what they wanted it to do. And bullet point number 2, and here's the secret, we're leveraging our purchasing power to make this all work. Right now, we can go out and buy a brand new Suburban for like $35,000 ballpark. The public's going to spend $45,000. The discounts we get as a government entity are huge, just huge. They're so big that we can turn around and flip them the next year and sell them for more than what we paid. I know that sounds mind-boggling, but we can literally drive a vehicle free for a year and then turn around and have a new one to use. So that's a extremely key point. That's where the money is. The other thing is, if I try to go out and sell our fleet or flip our vehicles, I'm not going to be able to get a very good price on my own. But Enterprise has a massive network, and they can get top dollar for our vehicles. They've got the ability to find the buyers and match up buyer and seller real quickly. So they've got the they've got the people and the methods to make it all work. And so that's the key there is we're taking our buying power, their selling ability, and we're putting them together, and we're able to keep our people and vehicles that are almost brand new. So pretty impressive.
So Doug, before you leave that, so we're able to transfer our purchasing power to Enterprise, is that the deal? And they're able to buy new vehicles?
Yes, they would essentially be the owners of the vehicles. They're going to help us sell off our existing fleet. And really the money that's coming back on the equity on these vehicles is going to be enough to make the lease payments to where we're actually going to be putting money in our pocket.
Just for clarification though, we still have to buy it, right? Can Enterprise use us and buy it for us?
Yeah, I believe, okay. Yes, they can buy them under our umbrella, per se. And they'll take care of equipping the vehicles in any method we need, for like our trucks, if we need plows or extra equipment on them, they handle all that for us. which is fantastic. They'll even make sure that when we go to flip these vehicles, they're not going to come take a vehicle away and then we're, without a truck when it's snowing outside and we need to plow roads. They'll make sure that they bring the new one, drop it off, and then take the old one away and sell it for us. So they handle all that management piece on our behalf, which is real nice. And then in the spreadsheet, if you want to go through the details, you can. But there's another couple areas of saving, not nearly as significant as the purchasing power, but maintenance is going to go down. If you got vehicles that are only 1-2 years old, you're not driving them long enough to where you have to do major repairs on them or flip out tires or whatever the case might be. You're looking at basically oil changes and windshield wipers. And then also, if you're driving newer, more fuel-efficient vehicles, you will have savings on fuel. So we know we're going to save money on maintenance. We know we're going to save money on fuel. The one area, though, that it will cost us money is increasing our insurance premiums. It's not a huge dollar amount, though. But I did talk to our insurance agents, and if you're trying to insure vehicles that are only 1 or 2 years old, that's definitely more expensive than if they're 9 and 10. So. And then to wrap it all up, and here's the key point, even if it was revenue neutral, we weren't gaining anything, we weren't losing anything. If we could just put our kids and our staff in vehicles that are 2 years old, and it'd be no cost out of pocket, to me, it's worth it just on that bullet point alone. So it's definitely going to be safer for the kids and the staff as they're traveling. And we don't have to worry about them getting broke down out on the road. So, and with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions. I think it's also important to mention, though, the lease, if at any point in time we're not happy, this isn't a 4-year thing we're signing up for. If for some reason something weird happens, we can break away whenever we want. So, Ken's convinced me, though, that we won't have any need to break away because the numbers will prove themselves out over time. But we're not tied into a long-term deal.
Can you explain how the math works in this table? I'm not sure what's going on there.
Okay.
Really understanding though.
Yeah, you'll see, like right out of the gate, we're flipping a lot of vehicles. In the scenario, you'll see 22 are getting flipped in year 21, and timing is still up to us to decide when to start. And then we'd only have 10 of them that we would still own. So they're basically going to, you'll see in that year 21, there's a lease amount of $157,000, but the equity that we're getting back on those 22 vehicles that are sold is $242,500, and then the equity on the leased, you'll see there's $113,000, and then the maintenance and the fuel is assuming that that's how much less maintenance we'll be putting in on the vehicles, that instead of having maybe a transmission repair or AC repair or something on one of our 10, 12-year-old vehicles, we're going to recover some on maintenance costs. And then fuel is just, hopefully we'll have more fuel efficient vehicles. And to me, that looks like a pretty aggressive number, but we calculated it out, and they have very, very sophisticated formulas that they use to try to predict the fuel savings. And then so when you add all that up together, it's a net cash flow of $300,000 in that first year that we wouldn't have coming out of our pocket.
That comes back to us.
It can, yes, or we can just roll it back towards the lease. So, because the next year we're going to turn around and we're going to technically owe $218,957 in year 2, so we can keep using that equity to help pay towards the lease. Am I saying that right, Ken? You can come on up.
The net cash column is simply the savings versus the current fleet budget. What we try to do in the orange line, the average bar there, is depict what you're currently doing today historically. So your current fleet budget is 157 if you add all four of those columns together versus what you could do with the enterprise model year after year. So from a savings perspective, that is what that net cash column is.
Yeah.
And one other key piece, the equity is coming back at various times because we have different holding patterns. So some of the vehicles will be on a 12-month term, some will be on a 36 or 48, which is why you see the equity lease column have different line items there.
Some vehicles you're going to want to flip in a year because that's when you can get the best return on your investment. Other vehicles, driving them for 3 or 4 years, they're still going to hold a pretty good value when you go to resell them. But that's where their expertise comes in. They know timing-wise what vehicles you want to hold on to a little longer, which ones you want to get out of quicker, and capture the most bang for your buck.
So we'll still have a combination of Suburbans and like Traverses to work with for driver's ed?
Yes, the fleet will look very similar. It may not be all
Right.
Suburbans, it may be Tahoes, because Tahoes is a pretty good vehicle to flip in and out of, yet very safe and reliable. So the vehicles will be very similar size and use, yes. And I'm glad you mentioned driver's ed, because that was something we had to verify was going to be okay, because a lot of we used to lease our driver's ed vehicles not terribly long ago, and then that market dried up. Nobody wanted to lease to districts anymore, and so that's when we decided it was probably best to go out and buy our own and do it ourselves, and that worked very well for us. In fact, it saved us quite a bit of money. The good news is Enterprise will allow us to use them for driver's ed purposes, and it won't violate the terms of our agreement.
Good. I know that we had a lot of success with the Traverses being a good, safe car that the kids could drive and
yes,
save a lot of money for the district. So I was hoping to keep that going.
Yep, a little less intimidating than jumping into a Suburban your first time. So,
Doug, is there anything about how these contracts go with being able to purchase at better prices and stuff are written that could change?
I'm sure it could. I mean, it's been this way for 20 plus years, a long time. It would be a big shock to all the municipalities and government agencies out there if they suddenly did away with these programs. So it would have to take something pretty drastic, I think. Very unusual for it to change. It could. I'll never say never, but.
And I wasn't necessarily talking about doing away with the programs, but doing away with the fact that someone could purchase for you and then you lease back from them. Like this, has that always been that way?
I don't know the history there. I think it has been.
So it's kind of almost like some people know the secret and some don't.
Yeah, so we're essentially buying the vehicle on your behalf and then leasing it to you from there. But all of the buying power and the tax implications are all passed through to you. And our pricing is based around the manufacturer invoice pricing, less the incentives, your government incentives.
So in essence, since they're still being used for government use, that's why it's still.
And Sharon, one of the things we've discussed is if we do want out of the lease, would be a cost to repurchase vehicles. And so taking what you see in that net cash column and really putting it in a rainy day fund so that if at some point we did want out of the lease, we would have a amount of money to start purchasing vehicles back.
Any other questions?
Sounds like a great deal to me.
It does. Leasing isn't intuitive, though.
Yeah.
But
It's all on the government rate.
Yeah.
The numbers bear this out.
Yeah, I really like the fact that we're gonna have new vehicles pretty much every year. And it's just, it is, it's definitely gonna make our students and staff safer and help our patrons with taxes. I mean, it's gonna help save some money there.
I will say Ken had to keep going over the numbers again. I kept thinking it's too good to be true. And in fact, I didn't want to even bring it here tonight until I got some support. And so I did recruit Kylie and Phil and Brad and Dr. Burke. And we had 3 or 4 meetings ourselves and shared some emails and talked about how does this work. And so there's been a lot of behind the scenes discussion on this, because we all kind of felt this is just too good to be true. It can't be that easy. And the other nice thing I didn't mention is, at any point in time, if we don't have a need for a particular vehicle, but have a different kind of need, maybe for whatever reason our sped routes go down and we don't need a vehicle for a sped route, but we have a greater need in technology for a van or something, we can quickly go, hey, you know what, we're really not putting any miles on this anymore. Can we trade this over and get another service van? And these guys can work the magic and make that happen. So it gives us some additional flexibility to get in and out of vehicles so that the fleet is truly meeting our needs at that time. So that helps, because I can buy off the state bid, but to flip an older vehicle and try to get the most money out of it, I don't have that ability or that skill.
Do we see any growth with the fleet size over the next 10 years?
As long as you're going to add kids and you're going to add staff, I'm afraid so.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying is our current fleet size is 32. And in 2030, it'll still be 32. I doubt that that's really going to be the case.
I agree. As long as the kids keep coming, and I think they will, and you're going to have another middle school that's going to be functioning in a few years. You've got to be able to do the grounds work on it, plow, snow, and all that kind of stuff. Kylie and his team are going to need more vehicles to get all that stuff done. And so, yeah, I definitely see over time that fleet's going to continue to grow.
So we may not see the full 835 because of growth.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, that is just showing you our fleet going forward. Okay. Yeah, but with the growth and flipping more vehicles, that number could actually be bigger.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a good point.
Any final questions or comments?
Dr. Burke, when would you like me to share those 2 tidbits that we talked about during the week? Is that now an appropriate time to slide it in? It was just information only.
Yeah, just slide them in. Yep.
Slide them in now? Okay. I had really exciting news. Everybody knows what the mod factor is, right? For unemployment, work comp. And last year we reported that in 2019, we're at 0.65. And then in 2020, it went down to 0.64. I'm telling you right now, those are 2 incredible numbers. 0.65, 0.64 could be the tops in the state. We just got our mod factor for 2021. It went down to 0.55.
Oh my goodness.
I'm telling you right now, I will put that number up any district in the state of Kansas. And I know our insurance agent, Jay Hastert with Elliott Insurance, says they don't have any clients anywhere close to that number. So, and that's a big kudos to the team, everybody. You know, we take safety very important. It's been a board goal. We've already talked about it tonight. So, and it's translated into the numbers, and we've just done extremely well there. So had to share that. That's some good news. Wish I could take credit for it, but I can't. But it's great that we're seeing those numbers. The other thing was just a quick update. You may have heard some numbers as far as energy with the, with the recent cold spell that we had. And you may have even heard of some school districts or municipalities that are getting these astronomical bills, and what are they going to do? And we need to go to the governor and try to get some help. And the good news is, on the gas side, we do utilize Greenbush, and we have, we're part of a purchasing co-op, and we buy in advance for protection for events just like this. And the good news is we also have a contract in place that protects us when these unforeseen circumstances happen. So even though our gas bill is going to go up, it's only because we had to use a little more energy. It's not because the cost per unit increased significantly. In fact, one of the numbers our energy consultant shared with us is that typically in the wintertime, winter prices historically are in the $3 to $3.50 range, and that's what we were able to lock in for. When everything was kind of going south, he said that he heard that it was going up to $15 a unit, and it was possibly going to go to 45, and he even heard some projections of 90. So there are some school districts and municipalities that just got clobbered because they didn't have the protection that we had. And then on the Evergy side, because I'm guessing some of you may have experienced a short blackout, maybe, I don't know. I was able to avoid it in my home, but I know others that said, yeah, my power was off for 30 minutes or 60 minutes or whatever. There was some that happened in Spring Hill, I know that. It wasn't a matter of Evergy. Evergy's who we buy our electricity from. It wasn't a matter of them running out of power. They had plenty of power in the grid to support the people of Kansas. But they are a member of the Southwest Power Pool, SPP, which represents 17 states in the central region of the United States. And even though they had enough to meet Missouri and Kansas demands, they were concerned that there was going to be energy pulled to other parts of the region. So in order to protect their group, that's why they were doing some of these rolling blackouts in our area. And the good news is everybody says, well, is my energy bill going to go through the roof because of all this? And no, energy rates are set by the Kansas Corporation Commission, and Evergy just can't increase their rates because they want to increase the rates. They got to go and appeal, and there's a process. So the good news is our rates aren't going to go up. But again, if we were using more electricity, it is possible our electric bills did go up, more than normal because of the cold spell. So unfortunately, I don't have bills in front of me yet. That just happened last February, and it takes a little while before they're printed and they get sent to us. I will say our energy cost probably went up. Maybe it was a higher than normal month, but it won't be a catastrophic event. So just wanted to share that information with you.
And you're going to hear some school districts that went from like a $10,000 a month bill to a $400,000 bill. So being in the cooperative has really helped us and protected us. So.
Yeah.
It's really good to hear that mod number, though.
Good to hear.
That's awesome that our employees are taking safety to heart. And
there's a lot of programs, the STEP programs, there's a lot of focus on being healthy rather than prevention rather than just wait until you get sick and then do something.
Yep.
And one is just so I understand that one is average, right? That's what that's the norm for districts is 1 and 0.55. So we're 45% less than that, which is a tremendous accomplishment. It really is. It's very difficult to do. So, very good. Thank you.
I wonder how well we've done since we put in the safety handbook that we asked for.
It's changed over time. Certainly.
Yeah, we have that data. We were actually, when we had one large accident, we went over 1, but we had been at about 0.86 and fluctuating around that area up until last year or two, where we've really, That's all I'm gonna say, because I'm not willing to do it.
It's a box that it goes into, so. Very good. Well, okay, moving on to our next discussion item is Spring Hill, School District Nurses Working Clinics.
Yeah, I believe at the last board meeting, I talked to you about being able to host a clinic here at some point. So this is what's happened. So we have the Johnson County Health Department has set up clinics, and they're working through Children's Mercy. Children's Mercy reached out to nurses throughout the area, school nurses as well, to come help with the clinics. So a lot of the nurses on their own decided to go work. Then Children's Mercy's lawyers got hold of them and said, hey, they're not your employees, so who's covering their insurance? At that point, nurses said, if I want to go work at this clinic, I have to be employed. They never asked to get paid, but that's how the coverage would have to work. So you want to say, well, if Children's Mercy wants them, why don't they just hire them? Well, they're not allowing them to do that. In our area, quite a few of the other school districts, with the exception, my understanding with the exception of Gardner, our other school districts in Johnson County have allowed their nurses to go and work. So how does this fall on liability? So the liability that if a nurse goes and gets hurt, and they would have to be employed by us while they're working. If they get hurt, it would be the same as workman's comp. So we followed up with our insurance company to check with that and checked with Greg Goheen. Both agreed that if they were there on our behest and they got hurt, whether they pricked themselves or they fell down and broke their arm or whatever, that would still fall under our workman's comp. If an employee is there and they did something completely negligent, that could fall under insurance, but that would have to be negligent. And having a patient that had a bad reaction to a vaccine is not negligent. So if they give a shot and somebody has a bad reaction, that still falls on the company that has the vaccine, also falls on the company that was providing the vaccine at that. So I did talk to our nurses. They would not be required to go do that if there were clinics, but as this gets bigger, at some point, the clinics are going to start being made more available to the public. Our nurses, not all of them, but our nurses have asked to be able to go work with that. So with that, I request that the board allow the nurses to go work at these clinics. These nurses would be our employees while they're working at these clinics. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
So were you saying that then we would pay them to work at the clinic?
We would pay them to work at the clinics. We could ask for ESSER funds to reimburse us for the time that they're at those clinics. So, but yes, we would have to pay them. It would be outside of our school hours, yes. And again, the word volunteer kind of gets you in trouble, because if they're volunteering, then they shouldn't be doing it without getting paid. But if they want the insurance to cover them while they're working, then they have to be a paid employee. So it doesn't make sense, because they're doing it because they're good human beings and they want to help. But the insurance companies get involved, and the insurance company says they have to be employees.
So is the reason that it's only Children's Mercy is because they're the only ones that are doing the clinics for the school personnel?
They're the only ones that have asked to use the personnel. I know that there's other clinics that are doing it as well. So I don't know if they are going to be wanting to reach out to school nurses as well. I think a lot depends on how big the clinics are. A lot's going to be depending on how much vaccine that they have available.
I think it's interesting, because as I just think through my own life and giving vaccinations in the past, outside of my own employer, you can be hired as a temporary nurse somewhere, like companies like Bright Star or things like that hire temporary nurses all the time to give vaccinations. So it's Children's coming to us saying, can we use your nurses under your insurance?
And you pay them.
And you pay them.
That is correct. It doesn't make sense to me.
No.
But at the same time, I just know that we had a ton of people that went through and got vaccinated, and because there are nurses there, and a lot of those people that, I shouldn't say a lot, many of those people that were working there were not employees of Children's Mercy.
How soon do you think this is, because this is a discussion item, right?
That is correct.
So how soon would they want?
We don't have another board meeting for a month. So it would be at least 4 weeks before we would do anything.
Any other questions?
I should note, I did have nurses that asked to be able to go and work those. And they did volunteer. One of them actually worked, and then that's when Children's Mercy asked about how the insurance. So the person's heart was in the right place, made the assumption that it was covered by Children's Mercy, but it was not. Unless there's major opposition, I'll bring it back for the next board meeting.
I'd like to look into a couple things. I'll email you or call you with questions too.
All right, moving on to informal discussion, presentation. Mr. Anderson?
Okay.
Yeah, I just got a little thing that I kind of researched over the last couple of weeks, and thought I would just kind of let you know where my thinking is and see if anybody wants to. And maybe I can just explore it on my own with the administration. But basically, over the last several years, there's been a seemingly concerted effort to grow socialism in the United States. Universities have seen a marked increase in socialist groups, most notably the Young Democrat Socialists of America. They've grown from 25 chapters in 2017 to over 124 chapters today. In people 18 to 29 years old, 55% consider socialism favorably. We're also seeing socialism creep into the K-12 public education with such initiatives as the 1619 Project and establishment of the Young Democrat Socialists of America high school groups. Many districts have eliminated civics courses altogether. Thankfully, I believe we are not one of them. And obviously, it's not our responsibility to teach what politics students should be. However, we can make sure we are educating the different political ideologies and the good and the bad in each. I would like to get an understanding of our civics curriculum and how we are teaching civics in our district. It's no more than that.
So what does that mean? You want a full presentation on our curriculum? You want to know what all the different areas that we...
Yeah, probably just would like to know what classes where it's taught. And they just
What
start
classes?
there. Yeah, classes. Do we still have a civics class? Is everybody required to take it? Is it just volunteer? Is it also, we discussed in history, or, I mean, I just don't really know where that topic is covered, that's all. And could maybe
Mr. Williams or
start
Mr.
slow
Wilson,
and-
do you guys have any questions pertaining to this?
You just want to know where the civics curriculum is covered in the high school? Is that what you wanted to say?
Yeah.
Like whether it's in American history, American government, all that aspect?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do we have any type of economics class? I don't know.
We have a personal finance course. We don't have a economics, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The personal finance is more how to
Correct.
do your own finances.
Correct.
We don't have the micro economics of how supply and demand works and all that type of stuff. And
nope.
I wonder if, kind of a mixture of, and I think that's what you're kind of saying, Nels, is the mixture of how capitalism, socialism works with an economic structure and how it works in the United States and all that other stuff.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we need to make changes right now. I don't really know what we do, so I'm interested in starting there. Just to understand what is taught and who's required to take it, if anybody, and that kind of thing.
Okay.
So do you have an...
Sure. I mean, you said the 1619. We don't do the 1619 project. We don't have that club that you were talking about.
I know we don't. I'm
yeah.
just use that as example as it's starting to creep in.
True. We don't have a standalone civics class. I mean, all of our kids are required to take American history their junior year and American government their senior year. And they incorporate those within that curriculum there. But we don't have a standalone civics course.
I think the American government's pretty much the same thing.
Yep.
I believe.
And that's required for seniors.
Correct, yes.
I might have mentioned that I overheard that class a few times. I think Mr. Winkler is doing a fantastic job. During quarantine, I got to sit in many of these classes.
So would you like to have a copy, Mr. Anderson, like at the year of the glance of the class of the American government to see what's taught, or?
Whatever's easiest for you. Whatever's
Okay.
easiest. And a quick email, a copy of what's taught, whatever.
Okay.
Just wanted to kind of just start broaching the subject.
Okay.
Not causing a lot of work.
Okay, we'll share that with all the board members. Is there anything else, Mr. Anderson? Okay, thank you.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to items from Board of Education members for future meetings. Anything to add to the list? Oh, hearing none. Moving on to the board work calendar.
It's March. It's hard to believe. So a year ago, our whole world's kind of turned upside down. So strategic plan update. I'm sure that we'll probably bring something to you in April, one of those two meetings. But we're right where we should be when it comes to the calendar.
Okay, moving on to committee reports. I haven't attended any.
I attended the K-12 high school or secondary site council, and they're doing some really good work. The principal there is really, I found her to be really organized and has a good working relationship with her teachers. And she even had asked the students to be on the site council meeting as well. And it was really good to meet them and talk to them. They had good things to say about Spring Hill and our relationship with them. And they are working towards some activities, including graduation. And they're really looking forward to having graduation here in Spring Hill. Probably outside, I guess. We'll see. We'll see what the weather and COVID looks like, but they're really excited to get together and see each other in person. So they just do a fantastic job. I'm always impressed with them.
Thank you, Jason. Any
On
other
February 24th, I met with the Spring Hill Middle School Site Council, and it was a lot of discussion about having kids back in the building and kind of some of the challenges and successes of that. And for the most part, it seemed very positive and upbeat. And then they did talk a little bit about implementing some of our new board goals and the MTSS things that they're going to do. So it was good. It was positive. So.
Good. Very good. Any other committees?
The high school site council met late last month. We'll talk about map testing. We're still tracking a little above the state, which is good, but sure we've slipped a little bit from last year. And then CTE had just presentation on that.
Good. Any other committees? All right, moving on to superintendent report. Dr. Burke?
Yeah, covered quite a few of the other issues I was going to bring up. So, but the one thing that I did want to talk about is the kind of Phil talked about this earlier, and the social media aspect. Let me put it this way. We were very fortunate that we have incredibly good technology people, but I use the word fortunate because we can't police. I mean, I want you to think about something. We have 3,500 kids, And there's at least 5 or 6 different social media platforms out there right now. And with that, if a student is doing something on their phone outside of school hours, we can't necessarily police that. The reason that we were able to resolve this one issue is because the students used the school-owned device. If they had not used that device and/or we hadn't had the technology people that we had, then we would have been in a lot of trouble. Now, here's the thing. There's people in the community that get upset and say, well, the school allows this. First of all, we don't allow anything like that, anything like that happen. And when we were notified, we started checking on it as soon as we possible. But even when we got the SRO involved, the SRO said, technically, there's probably not anything illegal here. And so I just want to be careful and make sure the board knows and the community knows, with all those platforms and all those kids, we don't have somebody that's checking social media 24/7. We don't have an employee that does that. When we're notified if we have the ability to research it, follow up, and to make them stop, we can. The thing is, kids are going to do some things that we don't like. I mean, somebody was talking about this weekend that some kids were going around and knocking on the doors and then running away. And some kids got caught on the cameras and
Ding dong ditch.
and that is, to me, that's a little bit like social media is, we don't condone it. School district doesn't like it, don't think it right, and shouldn't be happening. Hopefully, some homeowner doesn't get a little excited and hurt one of those kids. I really hope that doesn't happen. So it's one of those things that we really, we just were very fortunate this time. And I want people to understand we don't condone that. We are not proud of that fact that kids do some things that they shouldn't be doing, but we're not always going to be able to find it. We'll search, we'll work on it, we'll bring in the police, the law enforcement, but it just should be understood that there's a lot going on out there, and there was, we were informed that there was some social media that people were angry at us. It's like, we can't control what kids do with that device that their parents bought and put in their hands outside the school hours. In this case, yes, we could because of the school device, but we won't always be able to do that. So I just want people to understand that. Again, kudos to Phil and his people. What I don't think people realize is the amount of time and energy that it took to do that. And again, we're very fortunate that we have these people that's such attention to detail. When Phil told me what they were able to use to be able to find who did it, we're talking, and first of all, when I say find who did it, we weren't 100% able to prove that they did the whole thing, but we're talking about grains of sand, not breadcrumbs. And so when he said it, I do agree with him. It was very, very fine.
I did want to add just one piece too. Right now, our content filter, we block social media for school-owned devices on the school network. But we made the decision when we did the one-to-one deployment that when devices went home, it was optional for the parent to have the filter on or not. In this particular case, the student used the school device, but they did it off the school network because they didn't have the home filter. And so anything they do on that device that's not being filtered, I have zero visibility into. This was just an opportunity where we were able to find the original file, was really what it boils down to. But keep in mind that just because it's a school-owned device doesn't mean we've got full visibility because of the decision we made. I'm not saying it's a bad decision. I just want us to keep in mind that if this continues to be an issue, the board may need to reevaluate that decision, and maybe we're going to have to filter everybody on every school device. So.
Are there any other issues surrounding, like when people set up pages and use the school logos or, some of our things, because we passed that
District
policy.
buildings, pictures of our district buildings, those things.
The picture of it's out in the public. You know what I mean? We can't, if somebody comes in and starts saying, we are the school and that, then we can do something about that. But if it's just using our pictures and even some of our logos, the trademark, it's like the rearing horse. We call that the Bronco. But if you really want to go out in the public domain, that thing is called a Mustang. So we don't own the Mustang and we can't trademark that. Now, we can trademark anything that says Spring Hill on it. We can put those two things together and call that. But controlling, Greg can kind of tell you more about it, but the trademark part is really, really careful, or really, really specific on what we can or cannot do. But it's kind of like the Statue of Liberty. Somebody can take a picture of Statue of Liberty and use it. They really can't, take credit for it, but it's out in the public domain. There's not a lot.
I think it's just more important to point out that it's not sites like that using pictures of our buildings, our school district buildings are not approved by you or us or the district or anyone else,
That's
and
correct.
actually not appreciated, but there's nothing we can do about it, so it's not our preference. About the devices, Phil, again, thank you, but I also think it was a really good reminder to all students that anything that they create on a school device, because just to be clear, I don't think that it was the Twitter account created on the device, it was the bracket created. So I think that was a good reminder to all the students that what you're creating on your school device can be monitored. But I also think that it was important that you pointed out to the community in this public setting too, that this isn't something that the school could monitor. I mean, it took a ton of time, not just your time, some of our time, lots of your time, Phil's time, especially Mr. Williams, our SRO. But it was proud of our community for stepping up in that moment too. The last I knew, we had over 400 people reported that Twitter account. That's a community effort. If we see bullying like that in a community way, we can report it and we can take a stand as a community. And that's not the school. So I think it can come from both directions. If it was on a school device, it could be monitored, but even if it's not, that doesn't mean there's nothing that can be done with social media or cyberbullying, as I call it. As a community, we can hold people accountable too. So I'm just thankful of the way that it turned out and that it got all shut down fairly quickly. So
That's the end of my report.
All right. We do need an executive session this evening. There's 3 of them.
Mr. President, I move that the board recess into executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel to protect the privacy interests of an identifiable individual under coma. Those to be in session include the Board of Education members, Superintendent of Schools, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, and administrators as requested. The executive session to begin at 8:50 and resume at this place no later than 9:10.
9:10?
Yes.
second.
Moved and seconded to move to executive session for the purpose of discussing personnel matters of non-elected personnel under coma. Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start with Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Yes.
Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
approved.
Very good, thank you.
But we have a couple minutes, right?
Okay, we're back in session, open session. You have an action item for personnel.
Mr. President, I move that the board approve contracts with certified, is it with certified staff too, or just supplemental?
We'll just do supplementals for now.
The board is, I move that the board approve the supplemental agreements with staff.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve the supplemental agreements as presented. Any discussion or comment? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start with Mrs. Sealing. Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell. Yes. Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle.
Yes.
Approved.
Very good, thank you. We do have a second executive session.
Mr. President, I move that the board recess into executive session for consultation with an attorney for the body or agency which would be deemed privileged with attorney-client relationship. Those to be in session include the Board of Education members, Superintendent of Schools, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, and the school district attorney, as requested. The executive session to begin at 9:05 and with resuming in this place at 9:35.
No later than?
No later than 9:35. Yep. Oh. And guests as requested as well.
Second.
Moved and seconded, move into executive session for consultation with an attorney. Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell. Yes. Mr. Anderson.
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing. Yes. Approved.
Very good, thank you.
Love it. I had one to Greg. I'm assuming your recommended action is to accept the contract. The way this is set up.
Oh, there she is.
Yeah, there's
Back in
been board
session.
members resign over that recently.
Back in session?
You ready, Candy?
Yes.
Mr. President, on our attorney's recommendation, I move that the board approve the solar services agreement with the additional proviso of Form DA 146A to be added to the contract.
Can you repeat that for me?
Just
the proviso
form.
number.
Okay, DA 146A to be added to the contract.
Okay.
Second.
It's moved and seconded that the board, based on the counsel of our attorney, approve the solar services agreement with the proviso to add a DA 146A to be attached to that contract. Any final discussion or questions? Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll begin the vote with Mr. Winbolt,
Yes.
Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell. Yes. Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle.
Yes.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
Thank you. Mrs. Sealing?
Yes.
Approved.
Very good, thank you. It's nice
Thank
to
you.
have some renewable energy going. Moving on to our next executive session.
Mr. President, I move that the board recess into executive session to discuss employer-employee negotiations under COMA. Those to be in session include Board of Education members, Superintendent of Schools, Assistant Superintendent of Schools, and the Director of Human Resources, and the school district attorney, and others as requested. The executive session to begin at 9:35 and resume at this place at no later than 9:50.
Second.
Moved and seconded to move to executive session concerning matters relating to employer-employee negotiations under COMA. Candy, please collect the vote.
We'll start the vote with Mr. Updike,
Yes.
Mrs. Mitchell. Yes. Mr. Anderson,
Yes.
Mr. Boyle,
Yes.
Mrs. Sealing,
Yes.
Mr. Winbolt.
Yes.
Approved.
application window that's going to be open is for So, we're going through training for how to distribute ESSER dollars, for public schools on Friday. And, so we'll get a lot of those, what can we do with COVID-related money for public schools? So we're gonna get some of that. All of that's, online, the live on Fridays from 3 to 5, if anybody wants to watch. Move to adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.